you want the recording, yeah, I would. Yeah, Samantha, send me the information. I want to come to one of your classes. I do want to take, I've been telling all my yoga teacher friends, I want to take everybody's class. But if you're a yoga teacher teaching Zoom, you know how it is. I spend like 5 hours a day staring at a computer. And by the time I'm done, my eyes are crisscrossed. And all I want to do is not be, I want to throw my computer across the room. But I do have intentions of taking everybody's class. So welcome to Goddess Wednesdays. That's a thing now, I guess. And we're just going to keep going. And there's so many. My hope for today, there's 3 of them that I wanted to go over. And you're all, I think most of you are muted, but you are always very, very welcome to unmute. I'm going to mute things, everybody, if it feels like there's a lot of background noise, but otherwise, please at any point use the chat box or unmute yourself, because it really, this is the kind of thing that facilitates discussion and not so much just lecture, although I do have a lot to say today. But these goddesses that we started talking last week about Kali, and I asked people if they had a Kali statue in their house or some Kali image, and a couple people did, which I thought was really cool. But I bet you nobody's got these goddesses in their house that we're going to talk about today. So the 3 that I thought we'd do were Matangi and Chinnamasta and Dhumavati. So anybody, I'm going to scroll through the boxes. Raise your hand if you got one of them in your house. I didn't think so, because they're out there. They're like really, even like Chinnamasta is so out there. The only time that she's worshipped is during Kali Puja, which usually takes place in November. And Kali already, we talked about, is like this wild primal goddess of the edges and the fringes and the sort of like the darkness of society. Well, Chinnamasta is only worshipped at midnight during Kali Puja. And they say even like normal people like us should stay far away from her. But we're all rebels here, and I like that. So we're going to go right into it. So do you have, anybody have a request for which one you want to start with, if you know them at all, if you're interested in these goddesses? Matangi or Dhumavati or Chinnamasta. You could shout it out. Otherwise, I'll just randomly pick. Anybody? No? Okay. Anybody familiar already with these goddesses? Yeah, cool. All right. So speak up if you have stuff to say. So then I think we'll kind of go backwards. Spelling, yeah. So Matangi is this to everyone? I'm going to type them in the chat box. Matangi. And then do Chinnamasta and Dhumavati. Those are the 3 goddesses. And so these are all part of this group of the wisdom goddesses, right? The 10 Dasa Mahavidyas. Dasa means 10 and Maha, great. Vidya, wisdom. So the Dasa Mahavidyas are these wild wisdom goddesses. And they all have one origin story, and that origin story, it starts with Sati. I'm gonna, hang on, pin my video, speaker view. Okay, there we go. So Sati is Shiva's beloved, and Sati has this father that is kind of a jerk, and he hates Shiva, and he really hates that his daughter married this like wild, crazy, meditating man who hangs out with the ghosts and drinks, like, gets drunk in the cemeteries and the cremation grounds. And so he has a big party and he doesn't invite them. And Sati is devastated and she wants to go anyway. And Shiva's like, come on, babe, we don't care about that stuff. Like, please, if they're not going to respect us, why do we need to go and try to win their favor and affection? And she just can't bear it, and she wants to go, and she decides she's going to go anyway. And so she splits herself into 10 different forms, and each one more fierce than the next. And these 10 goddesses surround Shiva and basically scare the crap out of him until he says, okay, you can go. And so that right there tells you about the power of these goddesses, that they just, they don't take shit from anybody. These goddesses, they are so powerful and wild and unstoppable, really. And so that's sort of the main origin story of all 10 Dasamaha Vidyas, but then each goddess has her own origin stories. And so I'll share those with you as well. Each goddess actually has lots of different origin stories. So I thought we'd start with Matangi because she's the goddess of impurity and pollution and sort of like leftovers. And she's really this amazing goddess who sort of like flips the whole social order on its head. She turns the world upside down, essentially. And so one of her origin stories says that the gods Shiva and his wife Parvati were having a dinner party, and they invited Vishnu and Lakshmi over. And so you have like this dinner party of the gods and goddesses. And as they're having dinner, some food falls on the floor, and this food that fell on the floor all of a sudden became a goddess. And so she's called Uchista. Uchista means leftover. And the leftovers in this tradition are considered impure. Like if you're going to do an offering, if you're going to make some ritual for a god or a goddess, you would never offer leftovers. Leftovers are dirty. Leftovers have been touched and, you know, have saliva on them and they're impure. But this goddess, that's what you give her, is leftovers. She's made of the leftovers. She's made of that which is traditionally considered impure, not good enough for anybody, certainly not good enough for the gods. And so that's kind of wild right there. Tells you a lot about her. What does she look like? She's green. She wears a red sari and she's painted like green, dark green. And sometimes she even has leaves painted on her face and her forehead. So she's also the goddess of the dark forest. So you're kind of getting this sense, kind of like Kali, right? That all these goddesses are really goddesses of the fringes, of the edges, of the primal, of the wild. She has the power to control wild animals. And she's a goddess. Her name, Matangi, it actually means she whose limbs are infused with passion. And she's the goddess of pollution, impurity, dark forests. They say she is she who lives in the forest, who walks the forest, and who knows the forest. And there's one other story about her incarnation that I wanted to share with you. So in this story, there's a woman named Kuriva, and Kuriva is Shiva's sister. And Kuriva cannot stand that Shiva, she just thinks he's so gross. She thinks he's so dirty, and she can't stand that when he comes to visit, he's always he's leaving the dust of the cremation grounds on her floor. And she's like constantly sweeping up after him. And she says, you smell and you're drunk all the time. And it's just kind of like me with my kid, where every time he comes in, I'm like, oh, you smell, get in the bathtub. So she's so upset. And Parvati, Shiva's beloved, she watches this and finally she can't take it anymore. And she has to defend Shiva. And she gets so mad at Kuriva that she turns her into an untouchable. She turns her into one of the lowest caste people. And so Kuriva is, of course, she's so devastated. And Parvati forces her to be an untouchable in Varanasi, in the city of Varanasi. Has anybody, put it on gallery view so I can see all your faces. Has anyone been to Varanasi in India? Nobody. It's wild. It's really, it's where people go to die. It's the abode of Shiva, and it's on the Ganges River. And all along the Ghats, which are like the steps down to the river, there are funeral pyres that have been burning for thousands of years. And so people believe that if you die there, then you don't have to keep going through the cycle of rebirth and death again, and that you essentially go right to be one with the gods. And so Varanasi is really holy, but it's also this really city that's just full of death. It's just like death is everywhere, and you can go. I remember I was there a long time, probably 20 years ago. And I went down to the river, and there's like little boys playing in the water, and there's people like men brushing their teeth in the water. There's women doing their laundry in the water. There's water buffalo standing right next to them while they're doing all this. Can you imagine, like, you're getting the water out with like the same water that the water buffalo has just like shit in and you're brushing your teeth. And then there's a skull. I have a picture of it. I have to find it. Like right next to all this. And even sometimes bodies just float by. So it's totally this wild place where hang on, I'm echoing again. Sometimes it happens that I echo. All right, there we go. So all of this sort of happening at once. And this is another thing that's going to come up with these goddesses a lot, is that it's like death and life and blood and beauty and terror and all of it, like sex, and it's all merged. There's no saying like, oh, this is sacred, but that's not, right? This is beautiful, but that's not. Like all of it together is life. And these goddesses are here to like shake us awake to that like, you know, death and blood are just as important and necessary and sometimes as beautiful as the rest of it all. So so that's Matangi. So she is, so I didn't finish the story, right? So she gets turned into this untouchable. She's got to go live in Varanasi, and she's so mad and devastated about it. And she cries to Shiva. She's like, I'm sorry, you've got to help me. And so Shiva says, well, I can't turn you back. You know, what's done is done, but I'll give you this boon that anyone who wants to go to Varanasi can worship you. If they worship you first before they go on the way there, then they would have a benefit, you know, in Varanasi. Then their time would be blessed there. And so that's the other story about how she came to be. So she ends up becoming this goddess Matangi. Oh, hi, cat. Who is worshipped on the way, basically on the way to die, because that's why people go to Varanasi. And thinking about it a lot, you know, like we're really concerned with purity right now, aren't we? Like wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. And, you know, and that whole like line of like being clean and pure versus caring too much about it. Like, did you ever know anybody or like have a friend whose mom was really obsessed with like, don't, you know, the food falls on the floor, you can't eat it, or don't touch anything impure. And then like that leads to sickness because you need some of that. Like I've always been a big fan of like, if it falls on the floor, I let my kid eat it because I think you need to build up an immunity to some of those things. And we need good bacteria in our gut, right? And if we take antibiotics and we kill all that good bacteria, then we're susceptible to even more disease. Or it's even like how, I know this is sort of a topic that's in on the top of a lot of people's minds lately, but vaccines and whether you know, believe in them or not, there's something to be said about not avoiding the poison, right? To take a little bit of that poison, because if you're spending your whole life trying to hold the poison at bay, then there's no way to live. But if you can take some of that, the more you encounter the poison, the more you encounter the poison, the stronger you become. And so that's Matangi's essence as well, is like saying, you know, how willing are you to be with the impurity, the pollution, the disease, and she eats it. So she thrives on that. That's what sustains her. And she lives on the edges of society, just sort of like Kali does as well, in the forests and the graveyards. And specifically in Nepal, she's the patron goddess of the lowest caste of people. And these are the people that clean waste. They're the people that take the waste. They take it out of the temples and the cities and they clean it and they, you know, put it in where the garbage goes, but they also clean up human waste. And these people are essential, right? Without these people, the world doesn't go on. So they're just like, and their goddess is Matangi, and they live on the edges. They can't live in the villages with the quote unquote pure people because they're so impure. So they're forced to live on the edges. And in a sense, they sort of define the boundary of what's pure society. Samantha saying, makes me think of the Victorian age. Yeah, or just that whole idea of like, like, who gets to say what's pure? And are we, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, are we obsessed in the yoga world with purity? Yeah, right? That whole, like, it's the thing that's bugging the shit out of me right now. All of a sudden, it's like this little, like, bee in my bonnet is that whole thing about the lotus rising up and not one drop of mud is on its petals. Like, that makes me honestly sometimes want to punch somebody in the face. Like, why can't we have mud on our petals? Why do we have to be so pure? And is that even possible? Hannah said something great the other day, and because I posted something about this on social media. What'd you say, Hannah? Do you remember? It was something like, it's not even like full purity. It's just not even possible. Where, oh, there she is.
Yeah, just that, yeah, we sort of rise from the mud, but yeah, you can't be pure all the time. You will always eventually go back to the mud, and it's always, you came from it, so it's always going to be a part of you, like, you know, with the lotus thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, yeah, be in my bonnet as well.
Yeah, and I think and I was talking about it in that particular thing I said about bodies, and how often, like in the yoga world, this idea of having a pure body is so pervasive, you know, and like we twist to detox, which is so not even a thing. Like, you don't ever need to do a twist to detox your body. That's not how it works. Your organs do that. That's what they're for. But we have this thing, this like sort of like, I'm so bad, I must squeeze myself out and become more pure. I must do, you know, sweat and become pure. I must eat the right food and become pure. And then we have these images of sort of like, like perfect yogis dressed all in white. And my kids, Sandra's, where'd you go, Samantha? My kids and I went to the river and got all stuck in the mud with our flip-flops, and people stared at us like we were crazy. Yeah. But that's it. It's like there's something so beautiful about sort of giving the middle finger to that whole idea of purity, and just like, can you maintain your equilibrium, right? It's like you don't become then like, you're not dirty and diseased, but you can be with it, and you can handle it, and you can deal with it.
Like, add a little to that. I think it's so much like reminiscent of this moment in time where we're starting to realize how oppressive like the patriarchal structure of our world and yoga even is. And I think it's so cool to see teachers who are actually like taking hold of this feminine understanding and approach. And it's like, yeah, this is yoga too. We can be all of these things and exist in the fringes and the darkness and all of the like unwanted places, and actually reap this incredible and also like embodied wisdom too. It's like the return to our bodies as a sacred place. So I'm like loving all of this goddess stuff because I think it brings us like right into our own selves.
Yeah. And think of, like, speaking of the patriarchy, I mean, all these goddess stories are about like, fuck the patriarchy, all of them. And, you know, like, even now, if you go, Lacey says yes, if you go to India and you have your period, you're considered impure and dirty, and you can't go in the temple except for Matangi or some of these other goddesses. But like, it's so wrong that kind of stuff is considered dirty. Like, menstrual blood or women's tears are terrifying to men. You know, women's anger, we talked about this with Kali, that female anger is considered like so wrong, and it's sort of like impure. Like, we should be pure, and we should be chaste, and we should be calm, and we should, you know, sit on our white sheepskin rug and have our like crystals and our oils, and you know, like, sometimes it's just not like that. Life is messy. So anybody want to say anything else about
Yeah,
Matangi?
Kelly, I kind of wanted, like, what Sonia said really resonated.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking about the studio I was at before quarantine. I was doing womb breathing with a class, and one of the women complained that me doing womb breathing was threatening, and I wasn't allowed to say womb anymore.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm like, this is what needs to change.
So much needs to change. And like, that's why this is so beautiful right now that we're in this time. And we've been talking, some of you have been showing up a lot in my classes about what a powerful time this is, that we, like, things are being dismantled for us. And then we have this choice about how to show up when and if we go back. I don't know about you. I kind of don't want to go back. But, you know, like, we have a really powerful choice to make here. Oh, one other thing about Matangi that's really cool that I forgot to mention is that her offerings are made at crossroads, which says a lot about right now too. I really feel like we're at a crossroads. And even traditionally, like way back and in the Victorian age and before that, when someone, like when a thief was murdered, like when they were like death penalty, can't think of the word, but when they were, you know, murdered, they would do it at a crossroads traditionally, because they felt like then their spirit, their soul, once they cut their head off, the thief, the soul wouldn't know which way to go. It would have a harder time getting back to town. And so Matangi too, her offerings are made at crossroads, which is a place that it's thought that you leave behind dangerous things. Executed, thank you, Kathy. Sometimes, lately I've been having a hard time with words. Exactly. So that thought that you leave dangerous things, unwanted things, difficult things, at crossroads. What are the offerings again? Leftovers. Yeah, leftovers. And all of these goddesses, their offerings are things like, well, for Matangi, it's leftovers, leftover food, and used menstrual pads and tampons and things for Matangi. And also meat and wine or liquor. I think, oh, she totally sounds like my quarantine diet. I didn't even know it, but my whiskey and steak diet has gotten me really in touch with Matangi. But those things are considered tamasic, right? So they're goddesses. All these goddesses are goddesses of tamas. In Judaism, also when women are menstruating, they're unclean. Yeah, not allowed into the temple until a week after they've been menstruating. Oh, so women of childbearing years are unclean half the month. Did anybody watch Unorthodox? Right? Yeah, so good. And I think in the second episode, they're explaining to her about like, okay, now you're going to be a wife and this is what it's like. And when you're unclean, you can't be in your husband's bed. And she stops the woman, the teacher, and she's like, wait, so that's like 2 weeks of every month. And they're like, yeah, it's a gift. Isn't that great? No, it's such a great story of female empowerment when she fights against that. And yeah, we're not dirty. We're not fucked up. I know we're not, none of us are dirty. And I'm so on a crusade about that. Like, don't let yoga people or spiritual people or religious people convince you that you're dirty, that you're impure, that you've got some like innate badness that we need to squeeze out or stretch out or chant out or meditate out. Like, we're not. We're noble, we're brilliant, we're powerful. We have stuff we need to work on. We've got shadows, yeah, but we're not impure. Yeah, and so, yeah, so that's Matangi, and that's sort of, well, I'm trying to keep an eye on the time here. Oh, brilliant, okay. So Matangi kind of segues right into this other goddess, because I talked about Matangi, her offerings being made at crossroads, and that idea of sort of like there's a stuckness about being at a crossroads, about sort of like not knowing which way to go. And that's the goddess, the one who really embodies that is Dhumavati. Dhumavati, Dhum means smoke. And so Dhumavati, all these goddesses are so wildly terrifying looking, and they're really meant to shock you. They're meant to shock you out of your normal way of thinking. And Dhumavati in particular, she's always called ugly, the old hag. She's a widow. And this is really, I mean, talk about patriarchy and messed up. So, you know, traditionally in India, I've heard of this, the custom of sati, if the husband died, the widow was supposed to throw herself on the funeral pyre as well. And it does still happen sometimes. It's not so common anymore, but this was tradition. And if a widow remained after her husband died, especially if she was beautiful, especially if she was still in childbearing years, she was considered really dangerous. And that's why they would often widows had to go and live together in houses on the fringes again. So on the fringes of society, pushed out of so-called pure society, thought of as dangerous, difficult, challenging. And so Dhumavati is a widow. So already she's dangerous. She's on the fringes. She's impure somehow. And they say that when Shiva's beloved Sati threw herself on the fire. So what happens in the beginning, I told you the story about she wants to go to the party. So in the end, she does go to the party, and her father treats her so terribly, and he insults Shiva, her husband. She gets so mad that she throws herself into the fire at the party. They're having a big sacrificial fire, and she throws herself in. Malia says women aren't allowed in the sweat lodge during menstruation because their energy is above the level of the male energy. Some elders will allow the women to take an herb to bring their energy down, but many do not. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So if this isn't making you fiery, I don't know. We got to go get out there and fuck some shit up today. Okay. But Dhumavati, so Sati throws herself onto this fire, and the smoke that arises, they call it the sad smoke. She means, her name Dhumavati is sad smoke. And so she, the goddess, is the sad smoke that comes from the fire of Sati burning herself up in this fire. So, in that sense, smoke, think about smoke, it's sort of like, doesn't have a home, right? It's transparent. Sort of like goes around, it doesn't quite have a place to land. And she's in a carriage, often she's pictured in a carriage, and she has a winnowing basket. And everything you hear or read about her, it mentions this winnowing basket, which I had to go look up. People talk about it like everybody's got one on their kitchen table. I was like, what is that? So it's they're like round, usually made of like, wicker or some plant material. And it's a basket that's shaken, and it's used when making rice to separate the grain from the chaff or wheat. And so it's the power of discrimination and discernment. And so she's got that. So she's powerful, but she's terrifying. And she has a crow as her guide, as her animal spirit. And the crows, they are like carrion, and they often signify darkness and death. And she's in this chariot, but the interesting thing about the chariot is that it has nothing to drive it. It's just got reins with no horses on it. Anybody feel like that right now? Right? Like big time. And so she's stalled. She's got nowhere to go. And if that doesn't say a lot about what we're all, say anything. Go ahead, Sonia.
Is her chariot without the horses? Do you think that's in relationship to the metaphor of the intelligence of, like, the horses are the senses, and then there's like the chariot driver and the person? Like, do you think that's related?
Definitely.
Like essentially without faculty. And
yeah, well, part of it, they say she's like, she embodies the idea of losing yourself, like losing your beauty, losing your time, because she's at the end of her life, and losing your mind. And there's some, like, one of my teachers that I love so much is Byron Katie. And I don't know if any of you, Byron Katie, she's like my spiritual grandma. I've spent lots of time with her. And if you know her, you probably heard this story that she tells about her own spiritual awakening. So she was depressed. She was an alcoholic. She was miserable. She was full of rage. She was just like, she had hit bottom. and was in a hospital, basically a mental hospital, and just couldn't get well. She had eating issues, everything. I mean, you name it. She was suffering from almost every anxiety in the books, and she hated herself so much. She was really just like at the bottom, that she wouldn't even sleep on the bed at this hospital. She forced herself to sleep on the floor. She felt like she didn't even deserve the bed. And then her awakening came one day. She woke, she opened her eyes, and I think there was a bug crawling on her as she laid on the floor. And in that moment, she just started to laugh. She just started to laugh and experience this divine ecstasy. And that was when she had her complete awakening, that none of her thoughts were true, and that anytime she argued with reality, all it did was cause pain. And like this incredible spiritual transformation came from that point of being so low that she couldn't even sleep on a bed. And that's like Dhumavati. It's like when you break and then something ecstatic is released. Or another, I had a friend tell me this story about being on a train in India. He was traveling through India, and he got really sick, and he got sick on this train. And like, I don't know if you've ever been on a train in India, like, and not like the nice carriages, like the ones where you're packed in like 100 people with the goats and the chickens, and are like people like squished up against you. And he got so sick, and he had vomiting and diarrhea on this train, and still had like 18 hours of a train ride to go. Can you imagine? And standing there, couldn't even sit down, just you know, soiling himself. And in that moment had the greatest spiritual awakening of his life, because you go so beyond your mind, you go so beyond your form, right? And that there's such a freedom in that. And that's what Dhumavati represents. Going so beyond, you know, the horses that drive the chariot are like our wants and our needs and our, you know, all of our senses taking us here and there, and we gratify our senses. I want this, I don't want that, I want to look pretty, or, you know, all these things. And when that's taken away, there's nothing left. You are so free, right? Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose, isn't it? That's Dhumavati. She's got nothing left. She has nobody to impress. She's already so far on the fringes. Nobody even thinks about her. Who thinks about an old, ugly hag widow? Nobody. Nobody cares what she does. She's free. Nobody wants anything from her. She's free. You know, and she embodies this idea that when she's in this chariot with no horses, there's nowhere to go. So you can't go back to the past. And I know right now it's like, culturally, there's like this, you know, make America great thing, but like you can't go back to the past. And the past wasn't that great anyway. Nobody really, it would like, maybe it was great for you, you know, Mr. Red Hat, but for most people it was really shitty. So you can't go back to the past. But we also can't get obsessed about the future, because right now the future is like, does anybody know what's going to happen? I was talking to my girlfriend yesterday. She owns a yoga studio. I feel so like, for the yoga studio owners, my heart is breaking right now, because she said, I don't think I'll even open until September. Maybe, if that, if I ever open again. Like, we don't know. We can't go forward right now because we don't know what's going to happen. We can't go backwards because that didn't work. We're Dhumavati at the crossroads. And all we can do is just be so present. Right? It's just, what did I wrote? I wrote down, it's okay to have no goal, no aim, no direction. Just stay in the center and stay with a profound sense of not knowing. And that's really hard work, right? Nobody wants to do that. I want to know. I want to figure it out. But Dhumavati says, no, you just got to sit there with it. You just got to sit there with the smoke and the pain and the discomfort. And can you survive that? Can your equilibrium survive the collapse of everything you've known? Are you going to make it out of that collapse with your mind? Maybe you lose your mind, but then that's how you find yourself. And she's the goddess of disappointment, by the way. That's what she is, the goddess of disappointment. detachment and the freedom that comes from that. You know, can we mine, this is what Sally Kempton says. She says, can we mine the wisdom hidden in the heart of life's difficult moments? Not everybody can do that. I turned 40 a couple of years ago, and I feel like I have been coming sort of face to face with Dhumavati, and maybe some of you can relate to this, like always using my looks to sort of get by, or like, you know, just like counting on being cute. Like I just realized when it started to go and like that, I'm not like a young person anymore. I realized how much I depended on that to just like get me through life and to get me things. Anybody else, or is it just me? And like that, yeah, holy crap, that like all of a sudden it hit me one day, like you can't do that anymore. That's not cute. You're not cute. I mean, you know, I'm not like, you know, yeah, middle age is a whole new world. Yeah, had to just like redefine myself completely. And all those, I didn't even realize how much my life was structured on youth and beauty. Even like, you know, I'm not even saying like I'm the most beautiful, but like just that, like, you know, walking through the world, like with a certain idea of like, you're young and you sort of get things because of it. And I had to like totally reevaluate who I was. It's scary. You're not there yet. Just wait. It's 40, man, 40s or something. I thought, you know, when you're like, you have that Saturn return, right? And when you're 27, 26, 27, 28, that's really intense, that quarter life crisis. Holy shit, the midlife crisis is really something. Yeah, and say anything, help please anyone.
Kelly,
Yeah.
I have a lot of my clients are older, like 70s, 70s, 80s even.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they'll come in and we talk about like if they dye their hair, you know, I'll say, oh, like your hair, and some of them choose not to. And the thing I hear the most from women in that age group is that they feel invisible. And that dyeing their hair is like, they're like, well, but when it was gray, like I just like nobody even looked at me. And there's this really interesting, that's the refrain I hear all the time, I was invisible, I became invisible. So that makes me think of Dhumavati with the smoke. And the like, you can't even see her on the street. She totally is just, you know.
It's like she's the bag lady, right? That we don't even look at. We just walk right past. We don't want to look at because it tells us something about ourselves. We see ourselves in that. Yeah. And how there's such a freedom in that too, in being invisible. Like you can do whatever you want. Or say, yeah, Samantha, there's a power in invisibility. Totally. It's like, then you're free. And that's the thing that comes with age too. And I'm finding that it's like, okay, I can't rely on being young and cute anymore to get what I want. But I'm also saying like, well, fuck it. Now I can say whatever I want to say, what's true and what's real. And I don't care what anybody thinks. And, you know, I embarrass the hell out of my kid and I don't care. So there's a power to that too. Leonard Cohen said this great thing. He said, you know, at first the women were really interested. I was sexy, and then I was creepy, and then I was invisible, and then I was cute. It's so true. And so I think Dhumavati is that invisible stage for sure. What else did I want to say about her? She's sort of, I think, you know, Leonard Cohen too, just speaking about him, he had this amazing thing happen, right? So he was famous and then he decided to go take vows and become a monk. And he went to go live on top of a mountain at a monastery. And he spent many, many years, like 20 plus years, waking up at 4 a.m. and sweeping and sweeping and sweeping. And that was his life. And then he found out that his manager stole all of his money. She had embezzled every penny, and he had to come back down from the mountain because he had to make money again. And so he went back out on tour. And I don't know if any of you are into him, but if you saw any of those concerts, you can look them up on YouTube. look at the Leonard Cohen concerts right before he died, you know, in the last few years before he died. And there was something in him, in his eyes, in his voice, in his face about it. It's like, it's the embodiment of these goddesses, like a resignation, like you've been through hell and back, and like coming, like going to the mountain, coming down, losing it all, and like being there and getting up anyway, and just sort of having this way, like he almost seemed like smoke, like he could just float around. And his last album still haunts me. Yeah, it's like he totally, go Canada. I know. All right, I want to know a funny fact about me. I didn't go to my college graduation because I ran away to Canada to go to a Leonard Cohen conference. That's what a nerd I was. This was like when the internet had just started, and I met all these weird Leonard Cohen people in chat rooms, and I would go meet them in Canada, and I have a ring that his sister gave me. I'm total Leonard Cohen maniac. Anybody want to say anything else about Dhumavati or the smoke goddess, or just being stuck? Or how do you feel right now, Big Samantha? Do you feel like this is helpful? I certainly do, because definitely the whole thing of like get something done, be productive, and it's like, no, we're at a crossroads, we're stuck, we're in pain. And it's okay to not know what to do, and it's okay to just sit in your chariot and not go anywhere. Hi, sweetheart. Okay, sweetie. So if anybody wants to share anything about how you feel or anything at all, please do. Oh, I want to hug my deceased grandma. Sort of sad. Yeah. Anybody else? No? Well, unless you want to say anything, we can go on to we got time. This worked out perfectly. So there's one other goddess that I wanted to talk about, and her name is Chinnamasta, which literally means the severed head. And so we had first Matangi, the goddess of pollution, the goddess of outcasts and the impure, and this idea that like, we're not impure, and there's a beauty to, there's actually a goddess. So go ahead and offer her your used tampons and, you know, be wild. And then we've got Dhumavati, the goddess of invisibility and smoke and going nowhere. And then Chinnamasta, the beheaded one, is the goddess of radical self-sacrifice. So she's sort of like Sita, right? In a way, Sita's a goddess of self-sacrifice. But in Sita's case, everything gets done to her, right? Her kids get taken away. She's forced to walk over the hot coals by her husband. Everything happens to her. And in that way, she's sort of like a martyr almost, in a beautiful way. Whereas Chinnamasta does it herself. So the story of Chinnamasta is that, well, there are a couple of different stories. And one of them, she is having sex with Shiva. And she's on top, which already tells you something, because that was like wild, you know, like, oh no, she's on top, that's crazy. And just as he comes, she transforms into her fierce form. Bye, sweetie. Are you, hang on, say goodbye to my kid. Are you going to your dad's now, love? Yeah. All right, I'll call you later. I love you. Bye. He's there right at an interesting time. Like, what is she talking about? Is used to the weirdness here. So just as Shiva comes, she transforms into the dark. And dark, you know, that's a whole nother topic for another day. Like, why is she always dark? Why is black bad? You know, that we know why. Of course we know why, but you know, that's a big topic too. But so Parvati, as Shiva comes, as they both come essentially, she transforms into this fierce, dark goddess, and she also splits into three. And so it's her, and then she's got two attendants. Varnini and Dakini are her two, like her best friends, basically. And the three of them go traipsing down to the river, and they're just hanging out and playing and having fun. And her two best friends, they say, "We're hungry, mother. We're so hungry." And she says, "I know. We'll go back soon. We'll get some food." And they go, "No. We're so hungry right now." And she says, "Okay, fine." And she takes her fingernail and cuts her own head off takes it in her hand, 3 spouts of blood emerge from her head, one for Varnini, one for Dakini, and one, the head that she's got, that she just severed, her own head is drinking the 3rd spout of blood. What the fuck, right? Can you imagine if you like that's why I'm saying probably none of you have like a statue or an image of her in your home, because people would probably not come to your house. But, and I think there's maybe 1 or 2 temples to her. I think, actually, I don't even know if there's a full temple to her, but there are. Oh my God, somebody's got, oh yeah. Is that your phone that you're holding up? Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Jen. You know, and you can go look these up. They're amazing, amazing images. And one of the Chinnamasta images, she's always pictured squatting, not always standing or squatting, but often squatting over Kama and Rati. Kama, like the Kama Sutra. I can't even, what does Lacey say? I can't even text my friends back. She's cutting off her head to feed them. I can't even. Oh, it's so true. Yeah. And so Kama and Rati are the god of lust. Kama's like Kama Sutra, right? Kama is the god. He's like the Indian Cupid. And so Kama and his wife Rati are making love, and they're on the ground, and Chinnamasta, they're underneath her, and she's squatting on top of them. Like, how not gorgeous and feminine and beautiful is that? But it is beautiful. And there's often dogs around her. Dogs are considered like, you know, dogs in India are not like dogs here. People don't really have them as pets. They're wild. And especially in like Varanasi, the abode of Shiva, they're all over the place. They're like feral animals. And so dogs are considered edges, fringes, outcasts too. And so she's surrounded by outcasts. She's squatting over this couple that's copulating, and she's decapitated herself and spewing blood. Like, that is just the coolest thing ever. How could you not be down with mythology that has that kind of imagery in it? And so that, but then the cool thing about her is that she does it so happily. She's like, yeah, here, no big deal, cut my head off. And the head that's in her hand is smiling. And then when it's over, she puts her head back on and just goes about her business like it never happened, right? Like, amazing. She's got such composure. And so, yeah, she's really wild. Let me see what else I wrote about her. She's nude also, another thing. Control over her ego. Go Chinnamasta. I mean, please, don't you wish you could cut off your own head? So many times. I just like, take it off. Help, you know, get me out of my own way. And that's it. And she's delighted to do it. So it's not like sacrifice, like, I have to do this. It's like, I get to do this. What a gift that I get to make this sacrifice. And here's where we really see, like I mentioned it earlier, the idea of like love and sex and blood and death and all of it, right? So here you got blood and love. She's feeding her best friends, and sex. She's on top of the copulating couple, and death, you know, head cut off. So it's all of it together. It's so beautiful. It's all of that in one package, you know, just like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby, you know, blood and sex and love and death, and all of it is part of life. And something has to die so that something can be reborn. Something has to be sacrificed, you know, even like traditionally it would be a sacrifice of an animal. But I was listening to someone talk the other day, and she was saying all these studies were done in the 70s on plants and how they actually can feel. So even if you're a vegan, there's still some sense of like something has to be sacrificed for you to be nourished. There's kind of no way around that in the world. And it's that idea. It's the idea of nourishment through sacrifice. And sexual energy too. And that's her 2 friends represent, their names. So Varnini and Dakini. Dakini is a name for like a female yogini who comes and goes at will and sort of like just shows up. They're like wild creatures. Let me see. I think that Sally Kempton says something about what a Dakini is, but I can't remember. Dhumavati. But basically, they're just like sort of like wild forest dwelling beings who come in and out of stories at their own will. They're never married. They're not like your traditional wifey. They're more like these free spirit yoginis. And Varnini means kindness. I'm pretty sure that Varnini means like love, a type of loving kindness. And so how to cut her own head off is an act of generosity and kindness. And
kind of like just holding this different mood of like karma yoga or like service. Like I don't know, service sometimes feels like very pious and like, you know, and it's still great, but she's kind of just like serving, but with this like rock and roll attitude of like, you know, like no big deal. Cool.
There's no pretense about it, right? There's no like trying to be holy or anything. It's just like, you hungry? Okay, here you go, bitch, eat. Puts it back on, let's get back to business. That's it. Yeah. It's really, and so there's a lot of talk about her as being like, because she's on top of this copulating couple, that she's in control of sexual energy. That's she's somehow like, you know, you've heard this like in tantric sex, the idea that you can not come to orgasm, that you can somehow like control that energy, or you can be celibate, right? And that's a way of sort of you instead of using that energy towards sex or towards orgasm, you direct it into more spiritual ways. What do you think about that? Is that relevant? Is that possible?
So Kelly, I have to chime in on that one.
Yeah.
I've been doing work with Layla Martin, who's like, you know, like a tantric goddess with a human sexuality degree from Stanford or something nuts.
Ooh.
Anyway, she did do a sex magic with us in her Jade Pleasure course. And we had to do that. Like we had to set an intention and self-pleasure all the way up the chakras. And it was so insanely difficult. Like she kept saying, don't climax. Stop touching yourself if you're going to climax. And we had to just like bring the energy all the way up our crowns. And I'm not kidding you. I didn't have a head at the end. Like I was Chinnamasta at the end. Like it was just so actually mind blowing and difficult. And
that's so cool.
To do it all the time.
Oh my God, Masha, Layla, or Samantha, Masha says she's doing a couples workshop with Layla Martin too. That's so cool.
Yes.
Oh my God, I love this community we're making. Complete opposite of Dhumavati. Totally. Yeah. That's so amazing. You had that experience. I haven't had it. And I've always felt like, hey, don't tell me. I'm a big, like, don't tell me what to do. Like, don't tell me to stuff down my orgasm. Don't tell me not to feel it. So I've been really against that. But to hear you say that, and there's the kids right in the mix. I love it. That's amazing. So there is something to be said for controlling sexual energy. Well, then that's one of the things they say that she represents, that if you can do that, it is in a sense like blowing your own head off. Like, yeah, cool. What else did I say about her? I mean, just how free she is. She really is like, you know, to sever her own head, to feed the blood to herself and her friends, to put it back on and to go home as if nothing happened. There's such a freedom in that. And so all these goddesses, you get that feeling. It's all like freedom, the freedom to like live on the edges, the freedom to be impure, the freedom to deal with shit and waste, and the freedom to be stuck, and the freedom to be smoke and be sad and be not knowing, and you know, all the freedom to like let go of your ego and expectations, society's expectations. All of it comes back to just wild primal freedom, I think, and the power in that. I'm gonna see if I missed anything. I love doing this because I feel like I'm like going back to college. I'm just studying and studying and studying now for you guys. It's so fun. So we'll keep going because there's more. You know, we did so far, that's 4 out of the 10 wisdom goddesses. And next week, I mentioned it last week, but I want to do some books to read. Oh, there's just none. It's really stinky. I wish there were better books to read. But I'll come back to that in a minute. But next week, we're going to do Lalita Tripura Sundari. She's the goddess of passion. They call her the Empress of Love. And she's so awesome. And she's so, you need to write the books. I know. So that, like 5 years ago, I stopped teaching a lot of weekly classes so that I could write the book. And the book is nowhere. So, you know, I don't know if that'll ever happen. But I record all these stories, you know, and so they're all on my website. For those of you who don't know, I have a monthly subscription. It's $9 a month. And there's like 50 or 60 stories on there already. That's my main thing, what I do. And there's mudras and asana and everything. But next week we'll do Lalita Tripura Sundari. And I take requests too. So if you have any other ones that you wanna, just check the chat box. All right, anything else, I'm happy to talk about them, but we'll keep going. Let me look through my notes real quick. I think we pretty much went over it all. Oh, you know what, this is always nice to end with is, in this book, so the one book I do recommend is this one, Awakening Shakti. It's really great, by Sally Kempton. Really, really good one. And she doesn't do all the goddesses, but she covers a whole bunch of them. And she gives these great lists at the end of each chapter on where you can find this goddess. Like when you look around in your life, where do you see? And the one for Dhumavati, the smoke goddess, the widow, is so good. So she's the goddess of disappointment, old age, emptiness that can open into blessing, navigating the dark night of the soul, void states. You can recognize her in deep sleep, dark moonless nights, homeless people, dried up lakes and deserts, deep mourning, the pure experience of the now, and periods of assimilation when nothing outward seems to be happening. Shakti Rising is good. Yeah, that one's pretty good. That's a newer one. I like that. That's, is that Kavita Chennaiyan, Samantha? Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. So in that one, she takes the Dasa Mahavidyas, and she puts each one with a yama or niyama, right? That's the one. Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. And then for Chinnamasta, the list of where you can see Chinnamasta is so badass. I just love it. It's like lightning storms. Like that's the feeling of Chinnamasta. Let me just get to it real quick here and then we'll finish up. Where is she? Radha. Chinnamasta, there we go. So Chinnamasta is a sky full of lightning or a sudden thunderstorm, radical acts of self-sacrifice, sudden spiritual awakening into transcendental awareness, the headless state of thought-free meditation, the experience of having everything taken away as though your normal identity is being removed. And I love this, women's circles in which there's a naked sharing of experience. Right? You've been in those, or like, even not necessarily like an organized thing, but when you're with a powerful group of women and you just let yourself be raw and bare, that's Chinnamasta energy. Naked truthfulness, no matter what the cost. All right, so with that, I think we'll say goodbye for the morning. Unless anybody, if you have anything else to share, I'm going to unmute everybody. So if you want to share anything at all, you go ahead and say it. I'll hang out as usual until everybody is gone, says what they want to say. But otherwise, I'll see you next week for Lalita. Bye. Bye, Karen.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Sonia. Sanya, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, Kim. Thanks. And Samantha. Thank you. Samantha, you're my Zoom BFF now. I get to see you every day. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, Hannah.
Thank you. Take care now.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Kelly, thank you.
I'll see you Friday, Masha.
Yes, we'll see you Friday.
Yay. Yeah, Malia, there you are. Hi.
Sorry, I was running around, so I didn't want to. I didn't want to make people busy. I have to teach a class.
Yeah,
And,
no
we have
problem.
construction at our house, so I have to actually come to the studio.
Yeah,
So I'm
nice
here.
that you have that. You can go there.
I'm so grateful, honestly. I did tell you that